The stock market is partially up because of all the money that the government has given people who are unemployed. And if you see the commercials on financial media, they've created investment products that are smaller and smaller denominations. There's ones that's called slices, and you can buy $5 of a company, $5, and you can buy a 10 stock portfolio and invest $50. And it's been widely reported, and it's true, that there's been an incredible increase in tiny retail investor activity in terms of the accounts on Robinhood and at other platforms like that have just exploded in terms of size. And I think that's pretty dangerous. One thing that was interesting, at the top of the stock market in February, there was really unusually high call option buying activity by the little guy. But that has been far surpassed at the high of about 3 weeks ago, around June 8th or June 9th, where the number of call options that were purchased then was fully 50+% higher than the call buying that was happening at the peak in February, which shows that there's kind of a euphoria, weirdly, from people who maybe they would normally gamble that money or that they're getting from the government, but the casinos are closed, so the racetracks are closed. So instead, you can take a flyer on the FANGs and the Super Six, I call it, includes Microsoft and the like. Without the Super Six, there is no earnings growth in the United States stock market. There isn't any for the past 5 years. If you take them out, it's nothing. And there's no earnings growth at all in small caps. So this is all being driven by price, not by earnings. And of course, earnings have taken a humongous hit. And earnings in the stock market are now about the same as they were in 2016, when the stock market was like a third lower than it is today. So the fundamentals are completely out of sync with how the market's been manipulated, I think. And then we got the social fabric that you brought up, which we've talked about in the past. And unfortunately, I'm quite certain, I predicted this in prior interviews, that it's just going to keep getting worse. And in fact, this triple crisis of the economic recession, the COVID thing, the protests and all that stuff, it's really just the same problem through different lenses. It all fits together. And it also fits together that we've got a horrifically bad presidential election coming up, where, Joe Biden has a real enthusiasm problem. Everybody knows about that. And nobody knows really what his state of mind is these days, because he's hiding out in a bunker. And then President Trump's basic strategy, which has been very successful for him for decades, really, and certainly in the 2016 election, has backfired. His strategy is hyperbole. He likes to take a situation that is pretty good and say that it's great, and to take a situation that's great and to say it's the greatest thing of all time. Like we had the greatest economy of all time at the first part of 2020. No, we didn't. That's ridiculous. It's not even close to the greatest economy of all time. But this time, but in all of those instances, the hyperbole was on the right side of the distribution. It was a good economy. He just called it great. He wasn't saying it was a terrible economy that was great, because that doesn't resonate with people. It comes across as disingenuous. But with the virus, he screwed up, because he's got a situation where the virus is bad and he keeps saying it's going to disappear. It's not really a problem. He's on the wrong side of the distribution. The virus is a negative side of the distribution, and he's pretending that it isn't on the negative side. He's pretending that it's all pretty good and it's just going to go away. And that's, I think, why his unfavorable rating is going up. In the past, people said Trump's a liar. He was an exaggerator. There's a difference. It's a subtle difference, but there's a difference. Now he's not an exaggerator. He's just changing the sign from a negative sign to a plus sign on that variable. And I think that's a real problem for him. And I don't know if he knows how to get himself out of it. So today I saw in the news that they're arguing. The argument now has become, which of these two men is more intellectually challenged? I think they're having a debate on who's more senile. I mean, this is not an inspiring conversation when you have two ancient guys who their debate is centering around which one of them is in a greater slope of mental decline. So this is not encouraging.
Jeffrey, I want you to stick around because we want to continue this conversation on the other side of the. Don't go away. We have more with Jeffrey Gundlach, CEO of DoubleLine.
Is my 2020 census data safe? After sending your census response, your personal information is kept safe. By law, it can't be shared with any other government agency, law enforcement, or landlord. No one. So take your 2020 census with peace of mind. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
It's the everyday people who tend to have the biggest struggle. So those are the people that I love to talk to.
It's really the biggest labor story since the Great Depression. We've never had people so endangered at work and so many people out of work.
My duty is to make sure they are heard, that they feel seen, and their experience is part of the record of history of this moment.
These are more than just the sounds of a safe place to go after school. These are the sounds of interest being ignited and of mentors making an impact. At Boys and Girls Clubs, we don't do just one thing. We do whatever it takes to meet the needs of every kid who comes through those doors. Because whatever it takes is what it takes to build great futures. Great futures start here.
We've been broadcasting from our homes here at Yahoo Finance as we do our part to try to have social distancing and also try to flatten that curve.
If you speak with any expert in economics, in finance, they will all agree that we don't know what to expect.
It's time for us to start to reopen our economy, to start to reopen America, and we protect ourselves by protecting others around us.
Nothing will stop us from doing what we love to do.
Welcome back to the Ticker on Yahoo Finance. We have Jeffrey Gundlach, the CEO of DoubleLine Capital, with us, just having a conversation about the election, which is only 4 months away at this point. Jeffrey, I look at the betting markets. I know you do too. And on predicted, those Biden beating Trump and also a Democratic sweep, yet the markets are still going up. And some people think when there's usually a change in leadership that they might go down. What do you make of that?
Well, it's true that Biden's ahead pretty nicely and predicted now. And it's also true, I think, that there's a disconnect between that and the stock market because Joe Biden and the Democrats broadly, they pledge pretty loudly that they want to increase corporate taxes. They want to take that tax benefit away from what Trump gave corporations. And since earnings aren't going up at all, really, the taxes had a lot to do with levitating the stock market. And if you reverse that, that's going to be a really big problem. I was talking about, you talked the social fabric, and I think that fits into the election. I was listening to this fellow who I think they call him the president of New York Black Lives Matter. His name is Hawk Newsom. And he's actually a pretty interesting guy. And he was talking on a Sunday program, and he was talking about politics and the like. And he was, he's got particular core issues that he hammers home for his sort of constituency. But he started to go off on what he called a tangent. And he said, I don't want to digress too far, but what's wrong here is I don't trust any of these politicians. He said they always show up about a year before the election, and all of a sudden they embrace us and they want our votes. They never do anything for us. And that sounded to me to be not a digression or a tangent. That seemed to me to be really the point. The point is that there are a lot of people that feel that they're not sure what's wrong, but they know that over the last however many years, 20 years, whatever, 30 years, whatever it is, that somehow this economic arrangement is not working for them. And they understand that it takes many different forms. And there's all kinds of data points you can look at, like wealth inequality, but there's other things than that. I mean, these people, this political regime has been in charge for a long time. And it's awful how the investment in America is so uneven, how the quality of education is so uneven. And really, it's just not being addressed. And when I hear the president of Black Lives Matter in New York say, they're not paying attention to us, that starts to sound like a third party to me. I think that if the election were in 2021 and not 2020, I really think there'd be a third party. And one thing to watch on that is the labor force participation rate, the number of people that can have a job, that have a job, got down. I think it uptick in the most recent report, but it was down to like 52%. That 52% of the labor force was engaged. If that number goes any meaningful amount below 50, you've got a winning third party. It's called the unemployment party. It's called the I'm locked out party. And I think that's what's really happening here. And we've talked about this in past interviews. And I just think that will do nothing but get worse. And we will ultimately, I even talked about civil unrest during this summer in a past interview with you in the context of the conventions for this election. And that's already here. And I think that you were going to see an escalation in these problems as the voices of the unheard remain unheard, primarily, except for all kinds of sound bites and promises that I've heard a lot of times before, and so have a lot of other people in the American constituency.
Yeah, Jeffrey, one final question before we let you go. One of the things about DoubleLine, even going back to the name of it, it's don't cross the double line of risk. And we have a lot of investors watching, a lot of retail investors too. And what is the risk right now that people aren't talking about enough, aren't paying attention to enough, that they should be more aware of? What is that double line right now?
I think there's a real risk, and it's not imminent exactly. In fact, I don't think it's really in the next few months. But I think there's risk that the dollar starts to reverse into a significant downtrend, because the value of the dollar versus other currencies is greatly affected by the growth in our budget and trade deficit. The trade deficit is shrinking right now because economic growth is bad globally, but it doesn't matter because the fiscal deficit has just exploded higher. I mean, we're up at over $3.5 trillion already in the first 5 months of this year. In addition to that. And a lot of people say, but the dollar, you say the dollar is going to go down against what? Because everybody else is doing strange policies too. And that's an okay point, except it misses the fact that what we're doing here in the United States dwarfs the policies, particularly what the Federal Reserve is doing versus the ECB and other central banks. What we're doing dwarfs what they've been up to. We're really carrying the burden here in terms of fiscal explosion. And that, I think, will ultimately lead to a weaker dollar, which means that you might start to see some sort of purchasing power problems. You might also see that the dominance of the U.S. markets will start to fade away and maybe not turn into dominance, but an inferior type of forward-looking outcome. So I think these people that are buying slices of the stock market don't even know what they're doing. And have probably lost money already because they probably bought them June 8th. I just don't think they understand that this is not a fixed situation, and there are several more shoes, if not Imelda Marcos's closet full of shoes, to fall on this economic and market situation.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.